Play Like an Adult. Written by Johhny Fist. You won't be able to do it. The most provocative and repulsive phrase for any player or perfectionist. Hearing it, one is ready to shove all one's principles into the deepest cupboard and set about proving that this was definitely not said about you. There was an honoured actress of a provincial theatre who, having risen to the rank of people's artist, dearly loved her roles in the theatre where she performed. Many of her younger colleagues joked about her, saying she had been sitting in that theatre for years because the director kept giving her the same roles. Roles she knew how to do and could work with, yet she presented them as though they were the most complex parts imaginable, ones that only she could possibly handle. This flattered her vanity, and she eagerly took on these roles, working through every fragment to the fullest. Though, to be honest, she did it all rather monotonously. No one dared say this to her face, and no one wanted to quarrel with the leading prima. In the provinces, she was loved. People went to her performances. Quite often, after the show, she was the only one to leave the stage carrying flowers, and that, as a rule, is a mark of quality. An actress's success in a performance is measured by the number of bouquets she receives after the curtain call. Even in the most meagre productions, she managed to get flowers. Rumors even began to circulate that she bought them for herself and persuaded someone to present them to her, just to rub everyone else's noses in it. She didn't much care for film shoots because there she was not treated with due reverence. No one fussed over her as they did in the theatre, which meant no proper respect. One day, a young director arrived in the province, young by a director's standards, though not by a human's. He was the sort of person with clear claims on life, firm desires regarding his profession, and lofty expectations of audiences for his work, a kind of Jean-Luc Godard from Volhynia. Having trained at college as a communications technician, watched around 50 films, and shot 3 school matinees, 2 films about his college and his brother's wedding, he firmly convinced himself that he was ready for big cinema. Because successful people like him never start with small cinema. So having moved from his provincial hometown to this one, where there was a theatre and plenty of people's artists and honoured artists of every possible combination, he decided that this was where he would make films. And of course, everyone would love them. The whole country, the whole world, both the nobility and the rabble. In short, a man with pretensions to genius. And to realize his brilliant idea, he needed brilliant actors. Thank God they found each other. This amateur showed up at the theatre to see the artistic director. To look the part, he put on black flared trousers, a black turtleneck, and a black jacket. Exactly how he imagined a genius director should look. In the height of July, the outfit was a bit extravagant and far from cooling. So he came to the artistic director, sat down in an armchair from King Lear, removed from the repertoire a year earlier, with half the props having migrated into the artistic director's office, crossed one leg over the other and laid out his concept for the future film to another creator. The artistic director listened very attentively. At the end of the tale, being a people's cultural figure, he made a long pause, portraying the torment of doubt and deep reflection on the relevance of the issue in contemporary reality. Having finished this performance, he began to speak, smoothly in a resonant chest register with a hint of mentorship. 15 minutes later, a bottle of cognac appeared, which had, quite by chance, been left in his office after the previous premiere, which, according to him, had taken place in February. They drank, and the conversation shifted into a different register. The masks came off after another hour, and the opening of a third bottle of cognac, where the other two came from no one even asked. The artistic director finally got to the point.
So, what does the young talent need from me and my theatre?
That was when both he and we learned the essence of the matter. The young disciple of Tarkovsky and Eisenstein wanted to cast actors from this very theatre, and in the leading role he saw the very prima mentioned at the beginning of this story. There was, however, one small circumstance, one common to all cultural figures. There was no money, but the work had to be done. The artistic director recalled how he himself had started out and proceeded to recount at length the story of his 30-year rise. Another bottle of cognac disappeared in the process. It is worth noting that theatre folk are more resilient when it comes to strong drink than film people. The reason is simple. Theatre people rehearse more. The young director realized this. By the end of the artistic director's life story, the brilliant creator of audio-visual content could barely comprehend not only who he was talking to, but where he was. When the artistic director noticed this, he suggested that the director choose the actors he needed himself, and if he could persuade them, the artistic director would not interfere with their participation in the filming of the brilliant film, provided it did not affect the repertory performances. The film creator agreed and left. 2 days later, having resurrected from the realm of degrees, he returned to the theatre at the appointed time and began speaking with the actors. The younger ones readily agreed and were happy to take part in whatever the director from the neighbouring province proposed. Eventually, it came to the prima. Unlike everyone else, she refused to gather in the auditorium for a meeting with the director, saying that if he wanted to speak with her, he should come to her dressing room personally. Having spoken to everyone and arranged secondary and episodic roles with them, without promising a penny, he went to the prima's dressing room. She was not performing that day and had not planned to come to the theatre at all. But having heard of the director's arrival and his wish to film her, she came an hour before the general meeting, sat in her dressing room for 2 hours while he spoke to everyone else, never once stepping out, solely so that he would come to her personally and voice his proposal. She was proud, and that was all. During those 3 hours, admiring her reflection, she muttered under her breath either a role or how exactly she would answer the director and in what image. Let me remind you, she had many roles in the theatre, but according to her colleagues, only one persona. After 3 hours, there was a knock at the door. Leaning back on the sofa, which incidentally had migrated into her dressing room from the Queen of Spades, she deliberately drawled, "Come in." The door opened, and the future film's director appeared in the doorway. In his hands was a bouquet, not the most expensive flowers, but word had already reached her that he had brought flowers for no one else in the theatre. So she feigned surprise, laughed, and for a long time explained how unnecessary the gesture was and how she was just a simple actress, then accepted the bouquet after all, and placed it in a vase of water prepared in advance. To explain what followed more clearly, since this story may be heard by people not connected with the theatre and unfamiliar with its rules, on the artistic director's advice, after speaking with the troupe and before going to the prima, the director had been told to drop in on the artistic director to prepare for the decisive battle. He warned him that she was a difficult client and hard to negotiate with if she didn't want something. Then came 3 small glasses of cognac, for tone, for the blood vessels, and for mutual understanding. After that, the artistic director produced a small flask left in his office after the 3 comrades and poured cognac into it. Screwing on the lid, He handed it to the young director and wished him Godspeed, adding that the flask would come in handy in this difficult fight. The director began his conversation with the prima with compliments, bows, and admiration for her theatre roles, though he had seen only one of them. She was flattered and vividly recounted how much torment and suffering each role had cost her. Then he got to the point. He started with his trump cards, told her how he saw only her in the leading role, how the film would tour festivals, and how at every festival the applause would be not for him but for her, because he was a small man behind the scenes, while she would be on screen almost constantly from beginning to end. The actress's heart overflowed with happiness. She glanced alternately at the director in the mirror, all the while rehearsing how exactly she would bow to audiences in France, Italy, and Germany. It immediately occurred to her that it would be good to recite a monologue. She even had one in French from a play, which she delivered brilliantly, though she could not remember what it was about or what it meant. In short, she was intoxicated by future success. Meanwhile, the director still had not said what the film was actually about or what role he envisioned for the people's artist. Now she became curious and asked. At that moment, the director realized the flask would be useful. He took a sip, offered it to the prima. She refused. She assured him she was above all that. Of course. A brief retelling of the plot of this director's film. A village woman, raised on homegrown food and having spent her life tending pigs and cows, with a corresponding appearance, comes to the capital at her nephew's request. The nephew runs a modeling school, but he owes enormous sums to creditors. His business is collapsing, and he signs it over to his only aunt. He is an orphan, and she is his only family. He flees the country. The aunt arrives. He shows her everything, says it is all hers, and leaves. The aunt, whose only business knowledge is how to get 2 eggs a day from 2 chickens, knows nothing else. And then there are creditors, racketeers, and everything that comes with it. She must save the school, her nephew, and now her own skin. Otherwise, it's the end. In search of profit, she goes to the extremes. She becomes a stripper in a nightclub. Here, the director lingers in detail, describing how red thong briefs and a red bra will be put on her full 100-kilogram body and how she will spin on the pole. Promotes her models to the most dubious individuals, and independently masters the basics of the modeling business so she can teach young girls this thankless trade. In the end, she pays off the creditors, settles matters with the racketeers, and becomes a respected woman in the profession. That was the plot the young director told the prima. She listened in silence to the stirring account of the future Spielberg's concept. When he finished, she did not know what to say. She shifted her gaze from him to the mirror. Her imagination pictured her in red thongs on a pole, and then, for some reason, in the same outfit, standing before the respectable audiences of France, Italy, and Germany. Her single French monologue was now completely unsuitable. She reached out her hand to the director and said briefly, "Give it here." He handed her the flask. She drained it in one gulp. After the last drop, the prima seemed to transform. Swearing, abuse, and aggression poured from her mouth towards the director and his idea. She compared him first to excrement, then to something else. In Latin. He did not understand, of course. The tirade lasted 30 minutes. She recalled how she had waited 3 hours for this. Again she showered him, and his concept with every obscene word she knew, and she knew plenty. The director tried a couple of times to object, but only received his own bouquet in the face. Then she opened a drawer and took out a bottle of cognac, probably also left there from some previous premiere. Without any chaser, She downed 5 shots. It was not enough. She went on an even greater rampage. When she finally calmed down, she asked about the fee for the role, hoping at least that would console her. But when she heard that it was unpaid, based purely on enthusiasm, festivals and competitions, she went back into the role of an outraged woman for another 30 minutes. The director hoped someone might come in, calm her down, and help him out of this situation. But he hoped in vain. Everyone in the theatre knew her temper too well, and could foresee the consequences, so no one intervened. After another 30 minutes she calmed down. Her bottle of cognac was almost empty. The director himself would have liked a drink, but lacked the courage. In his short career, he had never received such a refusal. The prima was exhausted. She decided to end it all and slam the door, literally, to leave the dressing room herself and slam the door so he would understand how humiliating his proposal was. She was already at the door, finishing her speech, when suddenly the director went over to her bottle and drained the remaining 70 grams of cognac in one gulp. She exhaled and said only, "So you're an alcoholic as well," and slammed the door. The director gathered his courage, after gathering some cognac, and shouted after her, "This role is simply beyond you." He too wanted to slam the door in some way, but what he said, quite literally, opened it. The prima flung the door open just as sharply as she had closed it. The statement from this upstart struck her as outrageous. How could she, a people's artist, fail to cope with any role? The young man replied, citing an argument he had heard in the theatre, that she played all her roles the same way. She nearly burst into flames. Returning to the dressing room, she began hurling everything at hand at him. No pity. It was all state property anyway. He did not let up. Those 70 grams were exactly what he had lacked. He pressed his argument. She pressed hers. The only thing they had in common was a desire to drink. Then she said they should go to the artistic director and let him confirm that she could do anything. Any role was within her power. The director countered that perhaps in the theatre, yes, but in big cinema, under his direction, no. So they made their way to the artistic director's office. Long before they arrived, he heard their approaching, arguing voices. He grabbed the door handle and held it firmly. The door did not lock from the inside because in his drunkenness he had once locked himself in there a couple of times, forcing locksmiths to saw through the door and then install a new one. The prima desperately yanked at the door. The artistic director held it no less desperately. Negotiations began through the door. He agreed with everything. The young director continued accusing. The prima continued raging. From a distant office, the theatre's second director ran out with a bottle of cognac and 2 glasses. The young director could not understand how, at the most critical moment, cognac appeared in the theatre, and why, or how many premieres the theatre must have had for cognac to be everywhere and with everyone. Age took its toll. She grew tired. After a couple of glasses together with the director, they shifted to calmer tones. Still about the same thing. It probably helped that neither of them had eaten in a long time. The cognac reached the bottom, not only the bottom of the stomach, but the bottom of conscience, at least of her conscience. She gave in and agreed. She told him she would prove she was capable of this role. She would bring her own underwear because she had worn something like that before when she played in The Little Mermaid. The director mistakenly assumed she had played The Little Mermaid 30 years earlier. She corrected him sharply, saying that no later than last year she had been a refined mermaid. The idea of 100-kilogram people's artist as a mermaid is not pleasant even in a drunken stupor, let alone sober. The conversation returned to her dressing room to discuss tasks and details. The director believed she had broken under her own confidence. Yes, he broke under her confidence, but only because of his lack of experience. In short, the film would happen. The provincial director convinced the provincial prima that the role was worth every international award and that she would shine. And how it would actually turn out. When two geniuses meet on the same set, only the working class suffers. We shall see